So we start with breaking news out of Spain. A van has ploughed into a crowd of pedestrians in central Barcelona. It happened on the main street of Las Ramblas, which is a popular area with tourists. The area has been cordoned off. Emergency services are now on the scene. Police say this incident is a terrorist attack. Let's get more on this developing story with TRT World's Europe correspondent Simon McGregor-Wood. So details are still emerging, happened very recently. Tell us what we know so far.
What we know is that at some point in the last hour, we have a situation of panic on Las Ramblas, a huge pedestrian street running through the centre of Barcelona, an extremely popular spot with tourists. Reports confirmed now by police of a white van driving through crowds of people. The police initially called it a massive attack. We understand there are several people injured. We've seen a number of stills on social media of people being treated on the ground behind what appears to be a white van that's come to a halt. The latest situation is very fluid. This is clearly not an incident that is finished. Is, as you say, that the police are now saying that this is an act of terrorism. There are reports on local media of up to 2 armed men entering a nearby restaurant. Earlier, we had reports of the driver of the van being seen to flee on foot. The local authorities then called for local metro stations to be shut, presumably to prevent that person getting away.
To try and catch this.
And now we have the situation of perhaps 2 men in a restaurant armed, and that's the latest.
So obviously this is still developing. We do know that there have been pictures on social media of several people lying on the ground who look as though they've been very seriously injured. Of course, we have no confirmation of that at the moment. Tell us about this area, though. Las Ramblas, I mean, I've been there. A lot of people have been there. It's a big tourist area and a very busy part of Barcelona.
Yeah, I think Barcelona is one of the most frequently visited places for tourists from across the world. In Europe, 11 million visitors every year. Actually, there's been recent controversy about how many tourists are going to the city. Las Ramblas is a historic, more or less pedestrianised street that goes through the centre, where tourists tend to congregate for meals, both during the day and in the evening. It's an hour ahead. It's probably about 6 o'clock now, so a busy time. The weather is fantastic, of course, so the street would have been absolutely packed. On either side of it, there are carriageways for vehicles, but in the middle, where this incident appears to have taken place, it's normally pedestrianised. So whoever was driving the van would have had to take a conscious decision to drive onto the pedestrian part of Las Ramblas and then perpetrate this attack.
Okay, so we know that it's a white van. We think there is one driver who is apparently still at large in Barcelona. We've heard, I'm sure, a lot of panic at the time that it happened, precisely because people will have been thinking about other attacks where vehicles were used as a weapon.
I'm afraid they will. It is becoming a familiar incident. We've had several attacks since 2016 in Stockholm, in Nice, most seriously, in Berlin, 2 in London this year, 1 at Westminster, 1 at London Bridge. We're familiar with those, of course. This could be the latest in a succession of similar attacks using a vehicle to target people on the street. But we must, of course, stress that we don't know who's behind it, and some of these details are conflicting. It's very sketchy, but what is clear from the police's point of view, that it is an act of terrorism and it is unfolding. Those who perpetrated it, whether it's one person or more than one person, appear to still be at large.
Okay, and clearly we are hopefully going to get more information from police as this develops, but we know at the moment that police are reporting several injuries. They are on the scene, ambulances are there, police are there, and the area is being cordoned off, and as you say, they're trying to shut down public transport systems because the driver is still at large.
And just one last point on that, the people in the immediate area of this restaurant where 2 armed gunmen are allegedly holed up have been told to stay inside.
So, as I say, we're trying to get more information on exactly what is happening. When this first started, we were initially just told that a van had ploughed into a group of pedestrians. We didn't know at that point what exactly was transpiring. The police have now called this a terrorist attack. So it looks like that they have decided that this is something that was done on purpose with a terrorist motive. I'm just looking through the latest information that we're having. So police described the incident on Twitter as a massive crash. Emergency services also telling people not to go to the area. Now, this is the city's Plaza Catalunya. They've asked for the closure of nearby train and metro stations. One of the local newspapers in Barcelona has said that the driver of the vehicle had fled on foot. You can see in some of the pictures that we're showing there now that you might be able to see the van at some point, which has just been abandoned on the pavement after it mowed down dozens of people.
As you can imagine, Shirley, in a situation like this street filled with thousands of tourists, and when this incident happened, there are a lot of rather harrowing social media eyewitness accounts of people being separated, a huge enveloping sense of panic as people started to run away from the epicenter of this scene. There's some of that doing the rounds on social media. Clearly, people make the connection, don't they, with the previous incidents that have happened over previous months and years, and this appears to have been the latest of its kind, and obviously people were desperate to get away, but there are stories of people being separated from their loved ones, and obviously it's a very traumatic incident. And
what will be more traumatizing is that a lot of these pictures, as we know, Simon, get shown almost immediately on social media, even before news cameras turn up. Pictures like this are put on Twitter, on Facebook, and the police are asking people to be especially vigilant and not to put pictures out of people who may be seriously injured, because they're trying to get hold of the families, and we don't know who's been involved, and people haven't yet been identified. Now, just further to your point about these allegations that two armed men entered a restaurant, I am picking up on one news agency from Madrid that armed men have entrenched themselves in a bar in Barcelona's city centre after this van mowed people down.
There's a similar report coming from
now. Some media reports are saying that they were the same people who were driving the van. So again, as you've said, a little bit of a...
Be careful with that one, I think, because initial reports from the scene were of one person
running
driving away from the vehicle. It didn't mention whether or not that person was armed. Now we're getting reports here from El País, one of Spain's biggest daily newspapers, of two people who they are referring to as the perpetrators of the van incident, as you say, holed up in a bar. It is a bit messy. We don't really know how to join the dots at the moment.
No, indeed. And I recall when the Westminster incident happened on the bridge, we had first reports of a car coming down, and we had separate reports of someone with a knife attack. It really wasn't clear whether the person with a knife was the same person as the person in the van. So, as you say, we have to treat all of these reports with caution. But what we do know is that a van has been driven into a crowd of people, and several people have been injured, and there are separate reports of two armed men barricading themselves into a bar in Barcelona's city centre.